Hey guys, tonight, we drift away from our soft sheets and climate-controlled rooms to the windswept steppes of medieval Mongolia, where a baby's lullaby might be the distant thunder of hooves and the creak of a saddle. Imagine waking up in a round tent of felt and hide, warmed by a central fire, your first breath of air laced with wood smoke and horse sweat. You can barely hold your head up, and yet your destiny is already tied to a galloping beast outside. You're not lounging in a crib. You're tucked inside a gyr, a Mongolian yurt, and life here doesn't really wait for babies to catch up. Horses neigh outside livestock wander too close to the entrance flap, and your older sibling just got their first bow. They're 6. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, feel free to let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. I always love hearing from sleepy folks around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your mother squats near the fire feeding it dung for fuel, because that's just what's available. The wind whistles outside, like a half-forgotten tune. You don't cry much. It's not encouraged. But you are wrapped tight in thick swaddling clothes made of goat wool, designed not just for warmth, but to teach your body stillness. Mongol babies, historians say, were bundled straight as an arrow, their limbs pinned in place. Not exactly the Montessori method, but efficient. Still, don't confuse this with softness. While you're swaddled and warm, the entire culture around you is in motion. You hear hoofbeats more often than lullabies. Life on the steppe waits for no one, and babies are expected to toughen up fast. You'll be strapped to a horse before your second birthday, not kidding, and you'll learn balance the same way you learn to breathe without thinking. There's no baby monitor here unless you count a curious lamb wandering into the gyr. You're constantly surrounded by people and animals, goats, brushing past your blankets, your uncle stumbling over your swaddled form, muttering something about fermented milk and missing saddle straps. It's loud, chaotic, and deeply communal. Fringe historians argue whether the Mongols invented infant horse riding or just popularized it through sheer necessity. But one thing's for sure, your earliest memories will be tied to the rhythms of hooves and the smell of leather. In fact, some Mongol mothers sang lullabies to the beat of a riding song, so their children would recognize that cadence even before they could walk. Outside, the sky is vast and painfully blue, the kind that makes you squint from your cozy corner in the gyr. There's no horizon, just space. If someone let you crawl outside, you'd be lost in the grass within seconds. Thankfully, you're more likely to be tucked into a saddle before that ever happens. Historians still debate whether early horse riding gave Mongol children long-term skeletal advantages, or just an impressive tolerance for saddle rash. Either way, you'll spend more time on horseback than some modern adults spend behind a desk. And believe me, you're not getting a padded seat. The concept of childhood is different here. You're expected to absorb everything by osmosis, by seeing, by doing, by being near the older kids who already herd animals and race ponies. Your grandmother might be sharpening an arrowhead while telling your mother about the time a fox spirit stole someone's shadow. No one talks down to you. There's no baby talk, just real talk, mostly about the weather, livestock diseases, and whether that new shaman is legit or a fraud. Oh, and you better believe everyone expects you to know how to recognize different types of wind. There's the cold biting one from the north, the gentler breeze that tells your uncle where to herd the goats, and the still air that makes everyone nervous. You drift in and out of sleep to these sounds: the bubbling of a stew pot, the clink of metal tack being mended, and the sighs of horses bedding down for the night. The fire crackles low. You're not even a year old, but already the rhythm of life is galloping ahead, and you're being gently dragged along by the reins. It's peaceful in a wild way, and you're part of it whether you know it yet or not. You're still wrapped tight in your goat wool cocoon, but already your muscles are being trained for stillness, balance, and eventually movement. Mongol parenting doesn't coddle. It's more of a quiet endurance test where babies are expected to adapt, not the other way around. One of the first things you'll get used to is the concept of watchfulness. Everyone watches everyone. Your older siblings might be 5 or 6, but they're already responsible for small animals, and sometimes for you too. You're often balanced on someone's hip while they go about daily chores, milking mares, churning arag, patching up rawhide containers. The steppe is no place for a nursery. The world is your cradle. And speaking of ereg, your first sip of something that isn't milk will likely be that fizzy, fermented mare's milk. It smells a bit like sour yogurt left in the sun. Is it baby-friendly? That depends who you ask. Mongols believed it strengthened the constitution. Historians still argue whether this early exposure to fermented foods contributed to the Mongol gut resilience or just gave everyone powerful burps. Some fringe scholars claim Mongol babies were swaddled not just for warmth or safety, but to simulate the grip of a saddle. That might be a stretch, but if you squint, it tracks. Every element of your early life is shaped by motion. By the time you're able to sit upright, your legs are being gently spread to rest across a fur-covered pony's back. You'll be strapped in with padded supports, your tiny feet dangling like carrot tops, and led around the camp like a ceremonial goblet. There's no stroller, no bouncer, just a woolen sling tied to a saddle horn, and a lot of confidence that you'll get the hang of things. No one holds their breath when you wobble. They just chuckle and adjust the reins. Inside the GR, the environment is filled with quiet, constant education. Everything you see is teaching you something the way your father knots horsehair into a bridle. The motion of your mother's hands as she pats down goat dung to dry in the sun. Even the shadows of the tent poles stretching with the sunrise. No one gives lectures here, but you learn fast. If you reach for a hot cooking pot, you'll get your fingers smacked. If you crawl too close to the fire, someone might gently bump you away with their foot. It's not cruel, it's pragmatic. Mongol life is survival wrapped in hospitality. And amid all this, there's play. Mongol babies are given carved bone animals to gnaw on, not teddy bears. They might chew on a miniature wooden stirrup or chase after the tail of a lazy yak dog. And once you're old enough to sit unassisted, you're placed near the door, always near the door, so you can watch the comings and goings of life beyond the tent flap. Wind livestock cousins on horseback. Every new shadow is a lesson. It's not just humans raising you. The horses are always around. Their breath clouds the air on cold mornings, and their hooves send vibrations through the earth that you begin to recognize like footsteps in a hallway. Some people say Mongol babies could identify individual horses by their footfall. That's probably poetic, but who's to say it isn't true? Historians debate whether Mongol swaddling actually helped babies build core strength, or if that's just a modern romanticization. But it's undeniable that most children in this world are unusually still calm and physically aware for their age. There's no squealing, no flailing. Movement is focused, controlled. And speaking of control, your earliest toys might include a little bow strung with sinew or a stick shaped like a miniature lance. These aren't decorative. They're functional models meant to imprint muscle memory before you even know the word for weapon. You nap when you can. Day and night aren't rigid categories here. The steppe teaches you to sleep when it's quiet and eat when there's food. Schedules are fluid. The only real calendar is the one printed on the stars, and someone always knows how to read it. You are in many ways a passenger in your own upbringing, carried cradled, sometimes bounced in a leather sling attached to the saddle of your mother's horse. But gradually, you become more than a passenger. You begin to anticipate. You grip tighter. You bounce in rhythm. And eventually, you reach a moment that every Mongol parent dreams of, the day you balance on a pony all by yourself. It will happen sooner than you expect. And when it does, no one will cheer. They'll just nod and hand you a stick to go poke the goats. You're now big enough to sit up straight, but still small enough to vanish behind a goat. That doesn't stop anyone from handing you small tasks, carrying a bucket of sloshing milk with two hands, dragging a stick behind you to guide sheep, or crawling toward the saddle rack like it's a jungle gym. Everything around you smells like wool, ash, leather, and wind. You are, after all, growing up in the heart of a mobile civilization. Your home de jure isn't a static place. It's taken apart, moved, and rebuilt often. The central wooden crown, the felt walls, the latticework framework, all of it comes down and goes back up like clockwork. You watch as your parents dismantle your entire house and load it onto ox carts. And this doesn't upset you. It's just part of the rhythm. The world moves. So do you. Inside the gyre, life is ordered but never quiet. The space is circular, so there's no corner to hide in. Everything happens in the open. The fire crackles in the center beneath a hole in the roof that lets smoke spiral skyward. Light pours in from that hole, creating a spotlight effect that dances over your parents' hands as they prepare food or mend gear. The walls are lined with bundles, dried herbs, spare clothes, leather bags of fermented milk, tools, and occasionally a slingshot made of bone for your older brother. Even the family shrine honoring your ancestors is crammed between saddles and boots. But there's a method to the clutter. Every object has a designated space, and you're learning that order just by watching. There's also an etiquette to how you move in the Jaiyar. You don't step over the threshold without permission. You don't sit with your feet pointed toward the hearth. And you absolutely do not touch the headgear or weapons of elders unless you want your ear flicked. These little customs, repeated daily, shape your sense of space and respect. The family goat dog lounges near the door, blinking at flies while your grandmother hums a tune that probably predates Genghis Khan. It's a simple lullaby, but it carries a rhythmic pulse, not unlike hoofbeats. That's not accidental. Many Mongol melodies mirror the rhythms of riding. Some historians suggest this was a conscious effort to sync children's minds with motion early on. And then there's the smell, slightly sour milk, dry grass sweat, and sun-warmed wool. It's not unpleasant, just intense. You grow up knowing every family by their scent. The way some modern kids know each other's Wi-Fi passwords. While toddlers in other parts of the medieval world might be learning to kneel in church pews or pluck at harps, you're shadowing adults who measure distance by how long it takes a horse to cross it. You're absorbing complex information through imitation: when to yelp at a stray sheep, how to identify a storm by the taste of the air, how to coax a skittish colt using only posture. You're also learning quite unconsciously about hierarchy. The GR has a social layout. Men sit to the left of the door, women to the right, and guests face the altar. You don't think about this consciously, but you notice who gets served tea first. You notice who can interrupt a story without getting shushed. And you especially notice how your grandfather's stories make even your father sit still. Historians still debate whether this type of learning, observation-based, unschooled, was more effective than formal education in producing practical, high-functioning adults. Mongols didn't write much down, but somehow you'll know how to repair a saddle track, a lost calf, and butcher a sheep by the time you're 10. You won't be able to quote Cicero, but you'll survive a snowstorm at age 7. It's a different kind of wisdom. And occasionally there's laughter. Mongol humor is dry and quick like the steppe wind. Your uncle might joke that your swaddling looks like a sausage roll. Your mother teases your father for snoring louder than the oxen. Jokes are slipped into casual conversation like extra threads in a saddle, blanket, light, but durable. One day you'll toddle over to the doorway and stand just long enough to see a rider come over the hill. Dust billows behind him. He's delivering a message or maybe just visiting, but to you, he might as well be a comet. You watch spellbound as the horse slows to a trot and the rider slides off like it's nothing. That smoothness, that grace is something you'll chase your entire childhood. And for now, you're still inside the warm swirl of the gyr, but not for long. Outside is waiting. Eventually, the swaddle loosens your limbs, stretch, and your steps wobbly. At first start leading you outside the comforting ring of the gyr. You stumble through the tall, wiry grass that tickles your ankles and smells like hay and horsehide, reaching toward the sun, or maybe just a passing goat. You haven't said your first full sentence yet, but you've already tasted your first sip of arag, caught your first cold wind in the face, and fallen headfirst into a pile of saddle blankets more than once. There's no toddler-proof zone here. The steppe is wide open and littered with the evidence of 1,000 hoofbeats. You walk because you have to, and usually towards something moving. A dog chasing a sheep, a pony shifting its weight near the picket line. Movement draws you like moths to a campfire. By the time you can walk 10 steps without tipping over, you've already seen other kids your size balanced on horses like furry stools. And soon enough, it's your turn. It starts simple. You're not riding per se. You're placed on a very patient pony, usually one who's been around kids and won't panic if you hiccup. An adult, sometimes a grinning older sibling, walks beside you holding the reins, or a rope tied to the saddle. Your tiny hands grip the horn like it's your lifeline. Your legs don't even reach the stirrups yet. But you feel it, the sway, the rhythm, and it's oddly familiar. Some historians believe Mongol children learned to balance on horseback before they could run properly on foot. They compare it to modern babies learning to swim early. Riding was just built in. There's even a legend, probably embellished, that a Mongol child once fell asleep, tied to a horse, and woke up 20 miles later without injury. Fringe fact or poetic myth. Historians still argue. What's certain is that you're taught early to trust the horse. Mongols didn't treat horses like pets, they were partners. Each one had a name, often based on a physical trait or a mood. They were sung to brushed, talked about at dinner, and occasionally insulted affectionately if they stepped on someone's foot. And when you're riding, you're expected to be aware of the horse's feelings as much as your own. You're also not riding in solitude. It's a family affair. There might be 3 other toddlers strapped onto ponies, wobbling in unison like a chorus of animated rice balls. You bump shoulders, drop things, laugh when someone sneezes and falls sideways into their saddle cushion. There's always someone watching, but not always rushing to help. Falling is part of the learning. You roll get dusty and learn that horses don't wait for anyone. By age 2 or 3, you're doing short loops near the camp. By 4, you can probably ride in a straight line across a field as long as your pony feels like cooperating. And usually it does. These aren't show ponies with braided manes. They're sturdy, intelligent steppe horses, nimble as cats and stubborn as weather. And yet they know the kids. They tolerate the misfires, the awkward yanks, the sleepy droops of a child nodding off in the saddle. It's worth noting that you're not dressed for cuteness. Your clothes are practical thick felt tunic, soft leather boots, maybe a fur hat if it's chilly. Everything smells a little of sweat and sour milk. You'll never win a fashion contest, but you'll stay warm during a snow squall. And even here in the open, the world is watching you. Your grandmother peers out from the gear, squinting like she can predict whether you'll fall off by how your shoulders are sitting. Your father nods approvingly if your posture holds. Your cousins laugh if you fart loudly while bouncing. This is your performance stage, and the audience is always nearby. One strange and delightful part of this whole arrangement is the singing. Mongol adults often sing during herding or riding, and those same melodies, equal parts lullaby and directional cue, are now whistled or hummed as you circle the pasture. It's said horses respond better to song than to shouting. So do children. The sense of unity with the animal starts now. You're not just riding, you're feeling. You notice when the horse tenses, when it hears something you don't. You start to move with it rather than against it. And occasionally, when no one's looking, you let go of let go of the horn for a second. Just a second. But it counts. And all the while, the landscape keeps rolling by, flat as a pan but endlessly changing. Hawks glide overhead. The sky turns 100 shades of blue before noon. Grasshoppers snap away from your pony's hooves. You're too young to remember all this later, but your body will never forget it. Because by now, the steppe is in your spine. By now, you're practically fused to the saddle. You ride with your back straight, legs dangling like 2 fuzzy roots, arms relaxed, but always ready to yank the reins. Or, more often, let the pony choose the way. It knows the land better than you do, after all. Your saddle is small, carved out of wood, and padded with leather and wool. It's built to help you stay upright, not comfortable. There's no soft cushioning, no stirrups small enough to fit your feet just yet. Mongol saddles are known for being high and firm, designed more for endurance than luxury. And it works. You're riding longer now, further, and with less supervision. At around 4 years old, you're expected to start herding. Not alone, of course not yet, but you're given responsibility. Go round up the goats with your brother. Make sure the horses don't stray too far from the camp. Keep an eye on the sheepdog because even it sometimes naps on the job. You're not handed reins like a gift. You inherit them like a right. One morning someone just points and says, "Go." And you do. You're riding with a kind of intuition. You steer with your knees, lean into the wind, and if your horse gets spooked, you don't scream. You grip tighter and hope for the best. Historians still argue whether Mongol kids had more natural ability or simply more exposure. But there's little doubt that by 5 most children could outride visiting diplomats from the more refined empires. You're also learning the terrain by memory. No maps here. You start recognizing landmarks, bent trees, dark rocks, the way a certain stream sounds different when it's running fast. The land isn't empty to you. It's full of meaning, full of cues. It tells you where the best grazing is, where a wolf might be hiding, where a rival clan's horses were tethered the day before. And all the while, your little tasks become rituals. Herd the sheep east before noon. Watch the sky for sudden shadows. Notice when the goats won't cross a patch of land, they know something you don't. Animals are teachers here too. Now you also start playing while riding. Not like modern playgrounds, more like mock herding competitions. Or speed games. You and your cousins race across fields to imaginary finish lines, whooping and laughing until someone's hat flies off. Sometimes you throw small objects while riding stone sticks, maybe even a ball of goat dung if you're feeling mischievous. The point is control, aim, rhythm. Some anthropologists argue these games were the foundation for Mongol cavalry tactics play disguised as training. They might be right, because soon those who show skill are handed real bows, real lassos, real responsibility. The humor of your life continues too. Your older sister jokes that your pony listens to her better than you do. Your grandfather insists he once rode blindfolded for 3 days because of a lost bet. Is it true? Who knows? Mongols love a good exaggeration, and your bedtime stories are 50% truth, 50% sheer nonsense wrapped in wind. And while you're learning all these skills, there's still time to just be. Sometimes you lie on your pony's back while it grazes, staring up at the sky like it might tell you a secret. Sometimes you chase after grasshoppers and collect feathers. Not every second is training. Some moments are just wide-open childhood stretched across an endless green backdrop. Your clothes are patched. Now, your mother's sewing is precise but unbothered by frayed edges. You've probably lost a boot once or twice. You wear dust like a badge, and you no longer notice the constant breeze tugging at your ears. It's become your lullaby. You nap in the saddle sometimes too. It's not dangerous if the horse is calm. Mongol ponies are known for their intelligence and patience. They've carried warriors through snowstorms. They can handle one sleepy toddler. There's even a wordless pride in your parents' eyes. They don't say good job. They just nod when you return with the herd intact. Or when you help a younger cousin fix their reins. Praise is rare, but you feel it. And if you're lucky that night, you'll sit by the fire as a pot of broth bubbles and someone strums a 2-stringed instrument softly singing about the time a warrior's horse saved his life. You lean into your mother's shoulder, sleepy, full of meat and wind, and son, your pony grazing just outside. And though you're only 5, you already belong to the land, the horse and the motion. You're not strapped in anymore. You ride freely now, legs stronger, spine, more confident, hands relaxed at your sides, unless they need to move. The pony doesn't lead you. You lead it with nudges of the knee, shifts of the hip, tiny tugs that barely register to outsiders, but speak volumes to the horse beneath you. At this point, you and the saddle are old friends, and falling off would be more embarrassing than painful. The saddle itself is now more than a seat. It's a tool. You've learned to adjust its padding depending on the weather, check for loose stitching, and make sure the girth strap isn't twisted. Mongol children don't have toy boxes. They have gear racks, saddles, ropes, bridles, quivers. Every item is real, functional, sharp even. There's no plastic here, and everything smells like the world hides sweat dust and pine smoke. You're finally big enough for small chores with big consequences. Maybe you're told to fetch the herd alone or ride a few miles to warn a cousin about a straying line of cattle. You might be trusted to deliver a message, nothing political, but still something that matters. You get a real sense that your role in the family is growing, measured not by age, but by distance covered without adult correction. And with distance comes skill. Your first lasso is crudely made a loop of twisted hair and rawhide that smells like the back of a yak. You've practiced on fence posts and lazy sheepdogs, and now you're ready to try it on something that moves faster than you do. A running calf, maybe. Or your cousin if they're not paying attention. Either way, laughter follows, especially when you tangle your own feet and fall. Historians still argue whether Mongol children were truly war-trained at this age or simply war-capable. But the truth lies somewhere in between. No one hands you a sword yet. But you're learning the foundations: speed, balance, timing, control under stress. What makes this learning special is how informal it is. No drills, no shouting instructors. Your teachers are your older siblings, your aunts, your horse, and the wind. And they don't ask for perfection. They ask for progress. If you fall off 3 times and only cry twice, you're doing fine. You start developing instincts too. A 6th sense for movement behind you. An awareness of where your pony is looking. You notice which parts of the field are softer. After rain, which slopes are slippery in the morning frost. Which dogs can be trusted not to chase the goats. These things aren't taught. They're absorbed. The stories around the fire get more interesting now. You're old enough to understand more than just the punchlines. You hear about the legendary archers, about horses that wept when their riders died, about children who led herds across frozen rivers. These aren't fairy tales. Their cultural muscle memory passed down with all the reverence of scripture, but none of the solemnity. Even jokes start to shift. Now you're teased about your form, how you ride like a limping goose, or how your pony probably wishes it had a smarter rider. Mongol humor is affection wrapped in mockery, and if they're teasing you, it means you're part of the herd. Occasionally, a traveler passes through, maybe a merchant from China, or a caravan from the Silk Road, and they marvel at the sight of you. A tiny dirt-smudged kid galloping alongside adults like it's nothing. They might laugh in disbelief. You might wave as you pass them at full speed, laughing hair blowing behind you like a battle flag made of mischief. You're also forming your first bond with a horse that isn't just assigned to you. A favorite. A friend. One with a bent ear or a twitchy tail, the one that nudged your shoulder that morning like it was saying, "Let's go." Mongol children often sang to their horses, whispered to them, braided their manes with scraps of cloth. Not because they were cute, but because they were kin. The bond between rider and horse wasn't sentimental. It was spiritual. Fringe historians have even speculated that children believed horses could sense dreams. There's no solid proof of that. But there's something to be said for the way you sometimes wake up already knowing your horse is waiting for you. Hooves shifting, eyes scanning the horizon like it heard your thoughts before you spoke. And while you're galloping across a hill wind in your eyes, feet finally reaching the stirrups, there's a strange moment of clarity. You realize that for the first time you're truly part of this wild, moving world. Not watching it, not chasing it, riding with it. You, a tiny rider in a massive landscape, are no longer learning the rhythm of the steppe. You are the rhythm now. You're galloping now, not just trotting, not bouncing nervously in place, but letting your pony fly over the land like a gust of wind that happens to have a saddle. Your legs hug its sides, your hands grip the reins with quiet confidence, and your eyes squint against the steppe sun, which always seems to be shining directly into your soul. By now, herding is second nature. You can look at a group of 30 sheep and immediately notice if one's missing. You know the behavior of goats well enough to predict which direction they'll dart if startled. You've stopped needing to think about how to ride. Your body just does it. Mongol children were known for developing a kind of animal empathy that outsiders often mistook for magic. You don't speak to the animals, not exactly, but you listen and they listen back. It's not always graceful. You still fall. Your cousin still laughs when your horse refuses to cross a creek and dumps you gently into the mud. But now you get up quicker. You laugh first. And if you're clever, you splash your cousin when they try to help you up. Mongol childhood is full of tests, but rarely formal ones. Your tests come in the form of weather changes, missing animals, and distant thunder that might mean a storm or someone else's herd moving into your territory. And that brings you to one of the more subtle skills you're learning: observation. You're taught to read not just the sky, but the behavior of the birds. The tension in your pony's neck, the way the air tastes. Mongols didn't use compasses. They used clouds, wind, and memory. Some elders claimed they could smell where the herd had passed. And while historians still debate whether that's possible, you're starting to suspect it's at least partly true. You've also started learning about the dangers of the world, though not in a dramatic bedtime story kind of way. More like quiet warnings woven into daily conversation. Your uncle might point at distant hills and say, "That's where the wolves were last week." Your aunt might hand you a dagger not as a gift, but as a reminder in case something bites. You don't dwell on fear. You learn readiness. And sometimes you and your cousins even joke about it. "If I get eaten by a wolf," one says, "make sure they don't take my boots." They're new. Gallows humor, Mongol style. You're also part of a new kind of game now: mock chases. Someone plays the enemy. The rest chase on horseback, with whoops and lasso swings. You practice catching each other at full speed, twisting in the saddle, even drawing toy bows while riding. These aren't just games. They're rehearsals. Your ancestors rode into real battles using these exact movements. You're just doing them with fewer consequences and more laughter. And then comes the storytelling. At night, gathered under starlight or the flickering shadows of the Jaryar stories take on new importance. You're finally old enough to understand the full arc. Not just the jokes or the monsters, but the themes, the cautionary tales, the glory, the grief, the quiet nods of recognition from the elders when someone tells it right. One tale stands out: a boy who rode across 3 valleys to warn his clan of raiders. He was younger than you. He got caught in a storm, nearly froze, lost a boot, but made it. And when he returned, the elders didn't throw a feast. They just added his name to the wall inside the GR etched into a saddleboard. That was enough. You wonder quietly if your name will end up there one day. You also start noticing something else, how the adults treat you differently. They speak to you with less condescension. They ask you to help with real tasks. They trust you to keep an eye on the younger kids. And while they don't say it outright, their actions say it for them. You are one of us now. And so you ride a little taller. Your pony too seems to sense the shift. It trots faster when you ask, stops more smoothly, responds to your whistles like a friend would. Mongols believed each horse had a soul, and each rider was born with a few destined to meet theirs. You're pretty sure this one might be yours. And in that wide, endless stretch of land where the sky's always too big and the wind never sleeps, you find something surprising peace. You don't miss toys. You don't crave towns. You don't wonder about the world beyond the horizon. Yet. Because right now, the steppe is home. And your pony is waiting. It's early morning and frost dusts the grass like powdered sugar. You rub sleep from your eyes, stretch, and step outside the jeer just as your breath puffs in a little cloud. Your pony is already awake, ears twitching toward the east. You pat its side like you've done every morning since you were old enough to stand. There's no ceremony to it, but it feels sacred. Today, like most days, you ride before you eat. Not because someone tells you to, but because the animals come first. You swing into the saddle with the ease of someone who has done it 1,000 times. And maybe you have. Even though you're still small, your muscles remember what your mind is still learning. Rhythm, balance, stillness in motion. You're not just riding in circles now. You're helping guide the herd across uneven terrain, nudging stragglers with clicks of your tongue, raising a short stick when one of the goats decides to stage a rebellion. And when you ride out farther beyond the view of your camp, a strange thing happens. You're not afraid. This isn't bravery, not really. It's familiarity. The wind has been your lullaby since birth. The scent of the land dry-grass sun-warmed dung wild thyme is as comforting to you as a favorite blanket. Even the silence has a kind of voice here. You know how to listen to it. You're also learning to use tools now. Real ones. Your bow is no longer just a toy. It's a short, powerful weapon strung with sinew small enough for your arms but strong enough to make an arrow hum. You don't hit your target every time. But when you do, the adults don't clap. They just nod and say, "Good." Try again. That's the Mongol way, praise without applause. Recognition without reward. You practice from horseback, of course. That's where it matters. Shooting from a standstill is nice, but anyone can do that. Real skill is galloping across a field and hitting a post, while your pony kicks up a storm of dust behind you. Historians call this the foundation of Mongol military genius. You just call it morning practice. Some say that children in this culture learned more by age 10 than many foreign soldiers did in a lifetime. Others argue that this is romanticized nonsense. Historians still debate it, but if you ask your uncle, he'll just say, "Ride more, argue less." And while your daily routine is full of practical skill building, it's also laced with something deeper, belonging. You belong to this rhythm, to this space, to this people who never needed borders because the land itself was enough. You're not being trained to conquer. You're being trained to exist in harmony with everything around you. The land, the sky, the animals, the ancestors. The sky especially becomes your quiet obsession. You know its moods better than most. A long streamer of clouds means shifting weather. A low blue haze hints at far-off rain. You start noticing that your pony walks differently under different skies, less spring in its step during heat, more alert in cold, and time itself begins to take on a new shape. You don't think in hours or days. You think in sun positions, in herd migrations, in the angle of shadows against your tent. You know how far you can ride before lunch based on how the light hits your saddle. You sleep when tired, not when a clock says so. You eat when hungry, not when a bell rings. You are free, and that freedom is structured in a way most people wouldn't recognize. You also begin to understand the social layers of your camp, not just who's related to whom, but who's respected, who's listened to, and who's quietly avoided. These are lessons no one teaches you directly. You learn them over shared meat around fires and during the quiet hours of grazing when someone older starts talking about clan loyalty, or the time someone broke tradition and paid the price. And now as the sun creeps higher, you ride back toward the GR, feeling the weight of your quiver and the lightness of your heartbeat. Your pony is tired but obedient. Your mind is full, but calm. You can already hear your cousin yelling that breakfast is ready. Flatbread and goat fat, maybe a scrap of dried cheese if you're lucky. You'll eat, you'll rest, and then you'll ride again. Because this is life now. Not extraordinary, just Mongol. Your childhood is moving fast, but not in the rushed way of modern years. It's galloping paced by hoofbeats and shaped by wind. And now play begins to mimic war. You and the other children still race across the fields, still try to balance while standing on horseback, a trick that earns gasps from the younger ones. But your games have sharpened. You're not just showing off anymore. You're drilling. Without knowing it, someone sets up a row of sticks. You ride past at full speed, bow in hand, and try to hit each target with a blunt arrow. You miss the first two. Hit the third. Your cousin hits 4. Nobody cheers, but someone smiles. That's enough. Later that day, you'll get a turn with real tips, and your aim will improve by instinct alone. This is how Mongol children trained for war, through play, through repetition, through immersion. Historians still argue whether it was structured or simply cultural osmosis. But when your morning routine involves bareback gallops and your bedtime stories involve cavalry feints, the results speak for themselves. Now you're learning to ride standing. A trick, yes, but also a necessity in future battle, one that allowed Mongol archers to swivel, twist, and fire in any direction. And it teaches trust. In your pony, in your balance, in your timing. You fall. A lot. And when you do, someone shouts, "Get up," not in cruelty, but in expectation. No one helps you unless you're truly hurt. And even then, the first thing they ask is whether the pony is okay. You don't take it personally. You're part of something much bigger than yourself. Your meals now often involve group tasks. You help prepare dried meat, stir bubbling cauldrons, cut strips of fat, and spit grill organ meat that smells stronger than you'd like to admit. Food isn't always pleasant, but it's always shared. There's little waste, and everyone eats what they're given. And you eat fast, not out of greed, but out of practicality. Mongols don't linger over meals. They eat like they ride efficiently and with purpose. You finish your broth, wipe your chin with your sleeve, and head back out before the goats decide to wander into someone else's grazing territory. You're old enough now to be included in the quiet discussions between elders. You don't speak unless spoken to, but you listen. You hear about disputes over water, over horses, over marriage arrangements. You hear the names of distant relatives you've never met. You begin to understand the vastness of your clan, how it stretches beyond what your eyes have seen. And sometimes, when the day winds down and the fire is low, you ask questions. Why did the Khan ride east? What does that marking mean on your uncle's saddle? What happened to the rider who disappeared in last year's snowstorm? The answers aren't always clear. Sometimes you get a story, sometimes a shrug, sometimes only a proverb that sounds like a riddle. You're also beginning to understand death, not in a grim way, but in a real way. A foal is born and dies in the same week. A wolf takes a lamb. Your grandfather's voice is quieter than it was last season. No one speaks of it directly, but they all know. You see it in how they light incense, how they leave offerings near the hearth. Mongol beliefs weave ancestor worship into everyday life. And now you begin to notice the threads. Your grandmother teaches you how to fold your hands when speaking to the spirits. Not out of fear, but out of respect. She tells you they ride alongside us, invisible in the dust trails we leave behind. It makes you think twice before complaining about chores. And yet your days are still full of laughter. You and your cousin try to ride the same horse at once and fall off sideways, landing in a pile of dried grass that smells suspiciously like fermented milk. You try to catch a bird with your bare hands. You get pecked. You cry, then laugh, then chase it again. Even when training, even when learning how to draw a blade or sling a rope, there's joy. Mongol children aren't robots. They're wild, sharp-eyed, and always half ready to prank each other. There's competition, yes, but also deep camaraderie. You compete fiercely, but you share your saddle blanket when the wind gets mean. You're no longer a baby on a pony. You're a rider now. A small one, maybe, but a real one. And when the wind howls across the plain, you know how to lean into it. Eyes, open hands, steady mind, quiet. You're learning not just to ride the land, but to read it. The wind whistles across the camp, tugging at the felt walls of the jeer like a mischievous spirit. You barely flinch. The weather has become just another companion, sometimes annoying, often helpful, always present. You ride into it, sleep through it, even dream to its rhythm. Mongol life is shaped by the wind, and you've long since stopped resisting it. Today, your task is clear help round up a splintered group of horses grazing too far down a dry ravine. You're not alone. Your older cousin is with you, and together you move like a pair of birds skimming the ground. No need for long discussions. A glance, a nod, the flick of a rein. That's enough. As you ride, you keep an eye on the terrain. Loose rocks, patches of scrub burrows that could belong to marmots, or something hungrier. Your pony knows this too. It slows at the right moments, shifts beneath you like a living extension of your body. Mongol horses aren't fancy or tall, but they are durable, clever, and utterly unbothered by nonsense. Just like you. You round the horses up with practiced calm. No shouting. No panic. Just motion circles rhythm. The animals respond. They know you. They trust the sound of your riding, the way your shadow stretches long across the steppe. Back at camp, no one throws a party for your success, but your uncle offers you a bigger bowl of stew. That's enough. Mongol praise is a quiet reward, a second helping, a warmer blanket, a softer word before sleep. You're also starting to memorize the stories. Not just hear them. Repeat them. Recite them. Add your own spin. Mongol oral tradition is vast and flexible. A story might start with a historical figure and end with a mythical fox spirit. There's a blend of real and not real that feels completely normal now. Historians still debate how accurate Mongol oral histories were, whether they preserved hard fact or evolved with each telling. But you understand now that accuracy isn't always the point. The point is meaning, memory, connection. Some nights you help lead the singing, not with full confidence, but with the courage of someone who knows the melody by heart. The songs are long, winding, and usually about horses' bravery or unfaithful husbands who got what they deserved. Even your grandmother smirks at those verses. During the day, you're given more rope. Literally, you now carry a urga, a long pole with a rope loop at the end used to lasso animals from horseback. It's awkward at first. You tangle it in your sleeves, drop it mid-gallop, almost hook your own foot. But then, one afternoon, you loop a sheep on the first try. And just like that, you've leveled up. There's no applause, just a grunt of approval. And that grunt means everything. Your responsibilities expand. You fetch water, mend tack, repair holes in leather bags. You know how to thread sinew through a broken boot sole, how to soften dried meat with broth, how to patch a jeer wall when a wind tear lets in too much cold. You're not just helping anymore. You're contributing. And that brings something else, pride. Not loud, brash pride. Not chest-puffing, sword-waving pride. Just the quiet awareness that you are needed. That you have value. That this vast, rolling world of horsehair fire and wind sees you as part of it, not decoration. Not a nuisance, but a piece of the living rhythm. That night, a storm rolls in. Not violent, but persistent. The sky bruises purple. The animals bunch close. Rain spits against the side of the gyr in sideways gusts. You and your cousins huddle near the fire, and your aunt begins to tell a story about a boy who got lost during a thunderstorm and followed the stars home. Halfway through, you realize you know this story, but she tells it differently tonight. Adds new details, turns the boy's horse into a talking guide. Everyone chuckles when she imitates its voice. Someone throws a scrap of felt at her for being ridiculous. And yet, no one wants her to stop. Because this is what Mongol nights are for. Riding by day, remembering by night. And even as the rain taps like fingers on the roof, your eyes grow heavy not from exhaustion, but from peace. Tomorrow, you'll ride again. But for now, you sleep with a full belly, a warm blanket, and the deep, certain knowledge that you are exactly where you belong. You wake before the sun as always. Not because someone shakes you, but because the pony outside is stamping its hooves and huffing steam into the morning air like it has somewhere to be. And, well, it does. So do you. You slip into your tunic still warm from where you tucked it under the saddle the night before, and step outside. The air is crisp. The grass crunches faintly underfoot. There's a hush that only exists before the world fully wakes. You breathe it in. Even silence smells like motion out here. Today the task is big, a longer ride beyond the shallow valley and into the next plain where grazing is richer. You're going with a small group, your uncle, 2 cousins, and your oldest brother. No one asks if you're ready. You're included because you're expected. That's how it works. Your pony knows the route better than you do. It picks its way along the slope, avoiding icy patches without needing a nudge. The rhythm of its gait settles into your bones like a second heartbeat. You could doze off if you weren't so busy scanning the horizon. You don't talk much. Conversation on the ride is light. Maybe a joke about someone falling into the river last week. Maybe a short story about a man who swore he saw a flaming fox near the cliffs. Mongol humor blends seamlessly with superstition, and no one dares to call it nonsense. Not out loud anyway. After a few hours, the sun climbs higher. You shed a layer, tie it to your saddle, and sip from a pouch that smells faintly of goat leather and fermented milk. Lunch is still a long way off, and you won't stop just to eat. You ride through hunger the way you ride through wind, quietly, steadily, with purpose. You reach the distant plain by midday. The grass here is thick, untouched ideal. The animals scatter with delight, dipping their heads, trotting just far enough to make you chase them. Herding is a dance. You ride in wide arcs, shaping the flow of motion with your pony's body. One quick whistle, one flick of your stick, and the whole flock pivots like they were trained. Except they weren't. They just understand. That's the kind of thing that makes Mongol life seem like magic to outsiders. But to you, it's just the result of hundreds of days spent watching, learning, adjusting. No written manuals, no shouting trainers. Just instinct, repetition, and trust. You spend most of the afternoon out there. The sun warms your back. You dismount only briefly to stretch and check your pony's hooves. A small stone is lodged in one. You remove it gently, whispering thanks. Mongol horses work hard and complain rarely. When they do, you listen. On the way back, you race your cousin. No bets, just pride. Your pony surges forward, hooves thundering against the packed grass. Wind tears at your cheeks. You're laughing, not for anyone's benefit, just for yourself. Just because riding fast feels like flying, and for a moment you forget everything else. You win, barely. Your cousin curses but smiles. At the next hill, he pretends to fall behind so he can ride with the younger kids and show off. Mongol ego, you think, as wide as the steppe. Back at camp, the animals are watered, fed, tied down. You unsaddle your pony brush. Its coat check its eyes. The care is mutual. The horse watches you like it understands more than it should. Maybe it does. Dinner is loud. Meat stew, flatbread, fermented curds. Your aunt says you look taller. Your uncle says your horse probably lost weight carrying you around. You roll your eyes. It's affection in disguise. Later by the fire, the talk turns to Genghis Khan. Again. Everyone has a version of the great Khan's origin, born with a clot in his fist, trained by wolves destined to unite the steppes. You've heard it 100 times, and each telling is slightly different. Tonight, someone says he learned to ride by age 3 and never walked again. Probably false. But you don't care. Because in that moment, in that warmth, under that vast star-stitched sky, you believe anything is possible. Even riding before walking. Even chasing the wind. You're old enough now to feel the edge of responsibility sharpen. You don't just ride and return, you anticipate. When the wind changes, you don't wait for someone to point. You tug your reins and lead the herd to better ground. When a goat limps, you check its foot. When the clouds roll in heavy and low, you help lash the gear walls tighter without being asked. No one says you've grown up. Mongols don't really do ceremonial transitions from child to adult, not like birthdays or bar mitzvahs. Your passage is measured by trust, by the length of your solo ride, by the weight of the tasks you're silently handed. One morning, you're asked to ride ahead of the caravan to scout a path. Not far, just a few miles, but it means something. They trust your eyes, your judgment, your pony's sure steps. And when you return with news of soft ground near the willow grove, no one claps, but they shift course because of you. You're also starting to understand how much memory shapes everything. Your grandmother can still name the rivers her father crossed, even if they've changed course. Your uncle recalls the exact herd count from 5 summers ago. You too start filing things away, where the grass was thickest last spring, where wolves were spotted last fall, where your cousin lost a sandal and blamed a fox spirit. Historians sometimes call Mongol life fluid intelligence. Everything you learn gets used. There's no trivia. If it's remembered, it matters. At night, your mind hums with geography herds routes. You're starting to see the land as your ancestors did, not as empty space, but as a living map. The stars help too. You know which ones rise first, which tilt with the seasons, which sit just above the mountains you've never seen but heard stories about. And your dreams now are strange. Sometimes you dream of galloping toward a horizon that never arrives. Other times, you're flying above the gur, watching yourself below, small but swift, weaving through the grass like thread through wool. You don't tell anyone. Mongols respect dreams, but they don't dissect them. They let them linger quiet like morning mist. Back in waking life, you're handling animals alone more often. You know each one's quirks. This mare bites. If startled, that foal hates crossing streams. This old ram will try to eat your sleeve. You adapt. You lead. You listen. You're also learning subtle forms of communication. A narrowed eye from your uncle means, "Don't question me." A cough from your aunt means, "You forgot something." A silence from your mother means, "You're doing fine." Mongol families aren't cold, but they speak in gestures more than gushes. Still, the rare moments of affection shine like gold. One evening, after helping catch a runaway colt, your father tosses you a dried apple slice. That's it. No words. Just a glance and a gift. But it means more than 1,000 compliments. You chew it slowly, proudly. That night around the fire, your grandfather tells a story he hasn't told in years about his first ride alone across the desert. Everyone listens, even your rowdiest cousin. He speaks in a soft voice, rough with age, but clear. His words settle in like warmth in your bones. At the end, he looks at you, not long, just a glance, and says, "You'll have your story soon." Your chest swells. You say nothing. You don't need to. Outside, your pony snorts, brushing at the dirt with one hoof. The sky above is cloudless, endless, stitched with stars you now know by name. And beneath it all, you sleep lightly like a warrior who has not yet fought but already knows the rhythm of battle. You're nearly 10 now. And that means something out here, not just in bones and height, but in presence. You no longer hover at the edge of conversation. You're asked questions, trusted with decisions. Occasionally, even left in charge of a younger sibling or the edge of a herd. You still laugh, still chase rabbits on lazy afternoons, but the air around you carries more weight. Today, you're saddling up for a longer ride than usual. Not a grazing run, not a game. This is a supply journey, several hours out and back to trade dried meat and sheepskin for pottery and spare tack with a neighboring camp. You've never done it alone. But this time your cousin rides ahead, and you're told to follow at your own pace. It's a test, not of speed, but of sense. The land rolls before you like a slow ocean. The steppe has no roads, no markers, yet you know where you're going. The shape of the distant hills, the way the grass changes texture, even the shift in bird calls, these are your compass. Your pony trots steadily, ears twitching, nostrils flaring. You hum a song your grandmother sang last night to pass the time. It's half lullaby, half travel tune, just enough rhythm to match hoofbeats. Mongols often use these melodies to keep horses calm and riders awake. Halfway there, you spot something. A shadow, small, fast, darting near the ridge. Not big enough to be a wolf, but quick enough to put you on alert. Your hand instinctively goes to the knife at your belt. You don't panic. You slow. You listen. It's a fox. You let it go. But you'll remember that shape, that sound, that speed. One day it might matter. When you reach the neighboring camp, no one greets you with fanfare. Just a few nods, a half smile from a woman sorting herbs, a question about your father's back. He heard it last week, lifting a stubborn calf. You barter clumsily but fairly. They offer an extra scrap of cloth for your journey home. It smells of smoke and thyme. You accept it with a polite bow. On the way back, the sky shifts. Clouds gather. The wind changes. You taste moisture in the air. Rain. But it holds off just enough for you to make it home before the ground turns to soup. When you dismount, you expect silence. Instead, your mother is waiting with a bowl of hot broth. She doesn't ask how it went. She just hands you the food and ruffles your hair. That's all you need. Later that night, as the storm rolls over the horizon and drums lightly against the jeer, you sit near the fire while your grandfather tells a story you've never heard. It's about a child who rode through a thunderstorm alone to deliver news of a sick animal herd. The child slipped, almost froze, but was guided by their horse, who followed the scent of dung smoke from home. They arrived at dawn. No one cheered. No one clapped. But the next day their saddle was hung higher on the rack. No one says anything, but your mother meets your eyes across the fire. You don't say a word. You don't need to. You're no longer a rider in training. You're a Mongol rider. And as the wind howls and thunder rumbles far away, you sleep, not like a child, but like someone who has carried weight, faced silence, made choices. Someone the steppe now recognizes. You're beginning to notice that not all riders ride the same. There's your cousin the show-off, who pulls sharp turns just to hear people gasp. Your older brother smooth and silent, who rides like a shadow on the wind. And then there's you, steady, observant, never first, but rarely last. You're not the loudest voice at the fire, but people have started listening when you speak. You've reached the age where you start to think beyond the day-to-day. You wonder what lies beyond the hills. You've heard of great cities of wide rivers that no horse can cross without a boat, of palaces with walls too high to see over. You've never seen any of it, but sometimes at night, when the wind is still and your belly is full, you dream in stone and silk instead of grass and wool. And yet, you never feel pulled away from the steppe. Not truly. You know too much about it now. You know the feel of every kind of terrain under hoof, the soggy lowlands in spring, the dry crunch of frost-hardened earth in fall. You recognize which birds cry before a storm, and which call when the weather's clearing. You've even learned to track other riders not by prints, but by the patterns of disturbed grass and the timing of dust trails. Historians often speak of Mongols in terms of warfare, conquest empires. But what they often miss is this quiet part, the training that never feels like training. The deep-rooted understanding of a landscape so familiar that it becomes a part of you. A riding child doesn't learn the steppe. They become it. One day you ride out alone before dawn, not for a task, not for a chore, just to feel the morning air. You and your pony move in near silence, save for the faint clink of tack and the huff of breath. The horizon glows faint gold. No one sees you go, and no one asks when you return. Freedom is part of trust, and now you're trusted. Back at camp, there's talk of moving soon. The grass here is thinning, the water slower. You've done this before, packed up. The jeer loaded the carts, ridden to a new place. But this time, you're part of the planning. Your father points and says, "You ride west. Find a patch with less rock. Take your brother." That's new. You ride together not as a tag-along, but as a partner. You talk about nothing and everything, old jokes, weather signs, a neighbor's unruly goat. You find the spot, a slope with good drainage and fat grass. It feels right. You nod. Your brother nods. You both know it's decided. When the camp moves 2 days later, your mother glances at the spot and says, "Good choice." Just that. But you feel it in your chest. And now you notice other kids watching you. The younger ones. They try to mimic how you mount, how you hold your reins, how you whistle. One asks you to help them tighten their saddle. You do without thinking. Later, you realize they're watching you the way you used to watch your older cousin. And so the circle tightens. You're no longer learning, only you're passing it on. That night, your uncle tells a story around the fire about the Great Khan again. But this time, it's not about conquest. It's about a time the Khan got lost in a snowstorm and had to trust his horse to lead him home. Everyone laughs, especially at the part where the Khan falls face first into a snowdrift. But then your uncle gets quiet. He didn't curse the horse, he says. He thanked it. Not because it was smarter, but because it remembered the way when he didn't. You stare into the flames and think about your own pony who once circled back to camp without you after you slipped down a slope. You remember waking up covered in dust to find it standing nearby waiting. You reach for a stick, poke the fire, and say nothing. But in your chest, something settles. You're no longer just riding. You're remembering. You're becoming. You're ready for the longer rides, the harder decisions, the storms you'll have to read before they arrive, the strangers who might ride from the horizon and expect a steady hand, not a nervous child. You're ready to be part of the living current of this people, the pulse of hooves, and the silence between words. You're not afraid of the future. It's made of things you already know: windgrass, ash, stories, laughter, trust. And as the fire crackles low and your pony rests nearby with her legs folded neatly beneath her, you feel a sense of something final. Not an end, but an arrival. You've grown up with the rhythm of the steppe, and now you are part of it. So now, as you lie in your own bed, perhaps not a bed of felt or furs, but something soft and still. You can let the gallop of thought slow to a gentle trot. Let the dust of the steppe settle in your mind. You've followed a life shaped by movement, by sky, by the quiet understanding between rider and horse. You've swaddled in wool, drank sour milk with a wrinkled nose, learned to ride before you could run, and whispered stories to the wind like so many Mongol children before you. You've fallen, laughed, gotten back up, and listened. Always listened. To hoofbeats, to elders, to the land. And now the story grows quiet. Let the fire fade to a few warm embers. Let the reins in your hand become a memory soft and distant. The stars overhead drift slowly, watching over you as they did over every rider in every camp on every night before you. You're part of something older than stone, older than maps. A tradition carried not in books, but in breath and rhythm. Breathe in slowly. Hold. Let go. And if in your dreams you find yourself riding again, let the wind guide you. Let your pony choose the pace. You don't need to know where you're going now. You already belong.